It was never supposed to be more than a blip, just another ice-covered object, drifting lazily through the black, cold, silent, unimportant, the kind of cosmic debris that humanity has grown used to cataloging and forgetting. But then it moved, precisely, intelligently, and suddenly, all of that changed. They called it 3I/ATLS, and at first it fit the mold. An interstellar comet, the third of its kind ever observed, sliding into our solar system on a hyperbolic trajectory, from nowhere in particular. But right from the start, it was wrong. The speed was wrong. The arc was wrong. And then came the timing, the exact moment it passed behind the sun, when no Earth-based telescope could see it. That wasn't just a celestial coincidence. That was planning. That was cover. That was stealth. If you're still watching, subscribe now. You crave more than answers. You seek what lies beyond. Subscribe now and be part of the few who never stop searching. The James Webb Space Telescope, orbiting far beyond Earth's atmospheric distortion, caught it first. Not just the object, but the behavior. Thermal readings that didn't match a comet, reflectivity that shimmered like alloys, not ice, and then the maneuver, an arcing turn during solar conjunction that used the gravity of Venus like a slingshot. Natural objects don't do that. They don't fly like spacecraft. They don't steer. And that's when the whispers began. Quiet. At first, dismissed by official channels, but among the engineers and astrophysicists and orbital dynamics specialists, the ones who knew the math, who could read a trajectory like a signature, there was no denying it. This wasn't just a rock. This was something else, something made. Spectral analysis came next, and that's when the story truly broke. Traces of exotic alloys, titanium variants, boron composites, and carbon structures denser than anything formed in nature. Heat sources that didn't come from solar radiation. Internal warmth that pulsed with subtle regularity. No outgassing, no volatile decay, no signature of anything remotely comet-like. Just steady, internal power, like a battery in sleep mode, like a ship waiting to wake. Governments were briefed, classifications were raised, public channels were flooded with disinformation, a rare comet, a strange asteroid, a curiosity, but nothing more. But behind closed doors, space agencies stopped pretending, contingency plans were activated, rapid response missions were drafted, and a new question took over the conversation, not what it was, but why now? Because this wasn't the first object. Oumuamua in 2017, Borisov in 2019, and now 3I/ATLAs in 2025, each more complex, each more precise, each arriving after humanity had crossed another threshold in observational technology. It was as if something out there was tracking our progress, waiting for us to be able to see them, or worse, tracking our broadcasts, our signals, our noise, all the invisible pollution Earth has been vomiting into space for the last 100 years. Maybe it was never a matter of if we'd attract attention, only when. And now, maybe we have. 3I/ATLAs didn't emit a signal, not one we could detect. But it behaved like it had purpose, intent. It moved with grace, taking advantage of planetary alignments that no natural object should have been able to compute. When it passed Mars, its course subtly shifted, like it was correcting for observational drag. By the time it skimmed past Jupiter, it had completed a near-perfect gravity assist maneuver that changed its velocity just enough to raise alarm bells. The timing was impeccable, too impeccable, and when it passed into the shadow of the sun, our blind spot, it changed again. We don't know what it did in those 72 hours. We only know that when it emerged, it was warmer. Slightly, measurably. Like something had activated. Engines. Systems. A payload. We don't know. We're not meant to know. That perhaps is the point. To remind us of our limits, to let us glimpse and guess. What came next was worse. The shape. JWST captured a silhouette. Brief, distorted but real. No tail, no spin, just a long symmetrical structure, flat on one axis, angular, with edges too straight to be natural. And then came the glint, a mirrored flash that moved across its surface at a constant velocity, perfectly synchronized with sunlight angles. Not random reflection, not tumbling chaos. A pattern, a signal, a code, or just a hello from something too advanced to be subtle. The response from Earth has been chaos wrapped in denial. NASA issued a vague update about unusual reflectivity. The ESA pushed out a report about unexpected trajectory variations. The Chinese Space Agency stopped releasing updates altogether. And the military, silent, utterly and absolutely silent, which in itself says everything. Because if this is a probe, if this is an object of extraterrestrial origin, then humanity has already crossed a line. It can never uncross. We are no longer just observers of the universe. We are participants. We've been seen. And now we wait for what that means. Some think it's a scout, a simple reconnaissance craft sent to log our position, measure our signals, and evaluate our planet. Others believe it's a test, a behavioral trial to see how we respond. Scientifically, militarily, socially, will we panic? Will we attack? Will we attempt communication? Or will we do what we always do, argue among ourselves, deny the truth, and miss the opportunity? The darker theories are gaining traction too, that it's not alone, that there are more, that 3I/AT alas is just the first phase of something larger, a long, slow approach. Not invasion, not conquest, something colder, a patient evaluation, a judgment. Are we a threat? Are we a potential ally? Are we even intelligent enough to matter? The object continues on its path. Slow, stable, silent, headed toward the outer solar system now. Moving into deep space, but its shadow still lingers, because we don't know if it's gone for good, or just repositioning. And the deeper fear is that it doesn't need to come back, that it left behind something, a beacon, a signal, a device. Some believe there's already something here, something dormant, buried, hidden, beneath the ice of Europa, or under the sands of Mars, or deep within our own oceans. That 3I/ATLS didn't come to observe. It came to wake something up. And if that is true, then everything changes. The data is still coming in. More refined imaging, more spectroscopy, more thermal readings. But nothing will change the core truth. This was not a comet. This was not a rock. This was a machine, and it flew through our solar system with precision, grace, and silence. And in that silence, it spoke volumes. It said we are not alone. It said you are being watched. It said you have made noise for too long without knowing who was listening. Now we do. Now the entire planet waits. Not for impact, not for war, for the next clue, for the next object, for the next sign that the watchers are coming back, or that they never left. And the question we keep asking, the one that echoes in every lab, every war room, every observatory, every sleepless human mind, is not what is it. It's what happens next. And the terrifying truth is, we don't know. We don't know what happens next, because nothing in human history has prepared us for this. We've prepared for nuclear war, for pandemics, for artificial intelligence surpassing its creators. We've written treaties for space mining and drawn up blueprints for Mars colonies, but no nation, no agency, no university has ever put to paper a guide for what to do when something that isn't us builds a machine and sends it here. No manual for when the sky stops being empty. 3I/ATLS was supposed to be a rock. Instead, it became a mirror held up to our species, forcing us to confront the fragile illusion of human primacy. And what did we see reflected back? A civilization that's loud, arrogant, fractured, brilliant. A planet brimming with ambition, yes, but still arguing about what's real, still distracted by screens and stories, still struggling to believe the world is bigger than their own borders. And then comes something that makes no sound, takes no credit, offers no demands, just a presence, and the silence is louder than any broadcast. Because here's what no one wants to say. If this object was made, then so was the mission. And if it was sent, then someone, somewhere, decided to send it. That means intent. That means intelligence. That means they know about us now. Some argue we should respond, that we should show them who we are, transmit data, launch a return signal, demonstrate curiosity. Others say we shouldn't dare, that every sound we send is a spotlight in a dark forest, that if they're watching, they're already measuring, they're already calculating, they don't need an invitation. They've already let themselves in. There are factions now, unofficial, uncoordinated, but very real. The open channelists, those who believe we should reach out, actively, immediately, that this is the opportunity of 1,000 lifetimes, that to wait is to miss the moment, that 3I/ATLAs came to say hello, and we must not be cowards. Then there are the deep quiet advocates, engineers and ex-military analysts who believe in the dark forest theory, that space is dangerous precisely because it's quiet, that civilizations don't speak, they hide, because anything loud enough to be heard is loud enough to be hunted. The global powers are split. Some are probing for answers, commissioning new deep space telescopes, rushing to analyze every trace 3I/ATLS left behind. Others are going dark, shuttering data, locking files, reclassifying what was once public research. Because maybe the worst answer isn't that it's a threat. Maybe the worst answer is that we don't matter at all. That they came, they saw, and they left. No contact, no interest, just a glance, and that silence, that apathy, is harder to accept than hostility. But not everyone agrees that they're gone. That's the part gnawing at those in the know. The brief distortion during solar conjunction, the object warming just slightly, when it should have cooled, the maneuver that wasn't just a gravity assist, but a deceleration, and then nothing. No visual, no thermal, no radar bounce, it simply vanished. That doesn't happen in space. Even with its vast emptiness, there are rules, trajectories, predictable movement. And yet 3I/ATLS is gone. Not just too far to track, missing, as if it was never there, as if it slipped between frames of reality. And now a new theory is rising, chilling in its implications. It didn't leave, it parked. Imagine a probe designed not just to pass through, but to find a planet like ours, teeming, curious, noisy. It approaches, scans, records, and then blends, cloaks, hides, not behind the sun, behind space itself, a fold, a gap, a distortion of perception. Technology so advanced that it's indistinguishable from invisibility. We wouldn't even know it was still here. Some point to anomalies in low Earth orbit, brief unexplained radar pings, thermal ghosts that don't align with any satellite, data packets appearing in sensor logs with no source. The kind of things that get dismissed as interference until you start looking for them, and then you see a pattern, and the implications spiral from there. What if it's not observing from a distance anymore? What if it's closer? What if 3I/ATLS deployed something? A device, a network, a sensor, something that stayed behind while the main body vanished into deep space. We don't know its scale, its purpose, only that it might be watching still, measuring how we react in its absence. That's the test, isn't it? Not just how we respond to contact, how we respond to the possibility of contact, how we handle uncertainty. Because humanity craves certainty, like oxygen. It doesn't tolerate mystery. Not in science, not in politics, not in the human heart. But this is a riddle with no answer. A question scribbled across the stars with no one holding the pen. And amid all this, we are changing. Quietly, subtly. The space race is back. But it's not a race to dominate. It's a race to understand, to detect faster, to reach farther, to be the first to spot the next one. Private companies have shifted their focus. SpaceX has quietly filed patents for long-range intercept drones. Blue Origin has reallocated resources to cryo-tolerant AI payloads. Governments are investing in exoplanetary radar systems. And beyond all that, deep in bunkers and boardrooms, new doctrines are being written. Defensive doctrines, engagement protocols, threat assessments not for terrestrial adversaries, but for unknown intelligent vectors. And still, the public doesn't know the whole truth. They know the headlines. Strange comet. Unusual visitor. Scientists puzzled. But not the internal reports, not the classified imagery, not the tone in the voice of the mission lead at Webb when he said, "This isn't what we thought it was." Not the looks exchanged across tables in the Pentagon when the words "maneuvered object" were spoken. Not the shiver that ran down the back of a UN delegate when she was told, in plain terms, "We've been seen." And maybe that's the point. Maybe the silence isn't just ours. Maybe theirs is deliberate too, strategic. Because if they're watching, then every word we speak into the void is data. Every signal, every launch, every attempt to chase their shadow is information. And if they learn the way we learn, if they adapt, evolve, iterate, then they've already mapped our minds. So we build, and we watch, and we pretend not to be afraid, but we are. Not of war, not of annihilation, but of insignificance, of being the animals in the cage, finally realizing the zoo has visitors, intelligent ones, ones who don't need to rattle the bars, ones who just watch. And now that we know they're watching, the cage feels smaller, not because we're trapped, but because we've seen the boundaries, and what lies beyond them is not empty space, it's intelligence, patience, silence. So what do? We prepare, quietly, carefully, not to fight, not to flee, to understand. Because this was never about fear. It's about readiness, about responsibility, about finally realizing that the sky isn't a ceiling, it's a mirror. And for the first time in human history, we're being forced to look at our reflection through the eyes of something else, something older, something farther, something smarter. 3I/ATALS is gone. For now, but it left behind a signal without sound, a message without words. We see you. And now we see ourselves, not as rulers, not as gods, but as a single species on a small world, trying to find its place in a galaxy that may already be full. And if we are to be seen again, by whatever comes next, we must decide what kind of species we want to be when the Watchers return. Because they will. That much we now know. It's 5 years now. 5 years since 3I/ATLAS appeared in our skies and vanished with more questions than answers. But the world doesn't wait. It doesn't heal. It evolves. The silence of those years is not comfort. It's consequence. Because we learned something in the interim. Not just that we might not be alone, but that our days of innocence are over. We built new observatories in orbit around Mars, Titan, and even beyond Neptune. Deep space arrays that don't just watch light. They listen to the hum of gravitational waves, the thermals of deep inertia, the faint electromagnetic background noise of the void. We don't just scan for rocks anymore. We scan for anomalies. The strange warm signature slipping past Pluto. The periodic gap in the Oort cloud where something isn't there but should be. We have sensors that watch the gaps, the margins, the spaces between, because that's where we believe they hide. Internal to Earth. Networks of scientists, philosophers, security experts, and spiritual leaders now meet monthly. No longer as academic thinkers, but as custodians of our species' first contact. They ask hard questions. What do we say if they speak? What do we do if they don't? Do we reach backward into time, letting the generations gone before know that someday, the sky would rip open and demand an answer? Do we prepare a message for the next pass? A friendship, a warning, a surrender? Not long ago, in those gatherings, someone quietly proposed something radical. What if the silence from 3I/ATLAS wasn't apathy, but patience? That for a civilization capable of dispatching objects across interstellar distances, time is not currency. It's a metric of understanding. We scream across space in minutes or decades. These watchers may think in millennia. Their timing is nothing like ours. To them, 5 years is a glance, a decision, a hinge in history. Yes, but barely a moment. And if that's so, our urgency may be mistaken for hysteria, our impatience for desperation. And desperation is not a first response. It's a failure. So we have adopted a new posture. Not silence, not broadcast, not screaming. We are here, but steady, measured, stepping, a protocol. Small transmissions at prime intervals, encoded in neutrinos, gravitational harmonics, quantum entanglement experiments. These aren't signals, they're pulses of existence. Less hello and more still here. Our digital echoes ripple, not loud enough to break the empty vastness, but rhythmic enough to sound like life. Repetition over aggression, consistency over chaos, a heartbeat. And while we pulse outward, we also pulse inward. Humanity is changing because of this. We're seeing ourselves refracted through the question, what kind of species are we to the ones who watch? Are we thoughtful? Are we united? Are we capable of restraint when silence is louder than any scream? Modern art reflects it. Sculptors craft lines that stretch into empty space. Filmmakers weave stories with no punchlines, just spaces. Philosophers speak of quiet cosmologies and ethical waiting. We're teaching children not to measure planets, but to observe the spaces between, for that's where the watchers lie. Politicians talk of defense budgets and rapid intercepts, but everyone who hears the subtext knows it's not an invasion we fear, it's irrelevance. That our best defense may be proving we're worth noticing. That the truest act of power might be compassion, unity, purpose. And what about 3I/ATLS itself? The object faded. Yes, but its imprint lingered. There are new readings, periodic flashes detected by stabilized deep space arrays. Echoes at such low frequencies, they barely register as signals, more than vibrations, a frequency shift that implies mass changes. Not movement, but transformation. A deep space shadow mutating. Some call it residual engine burn. Some call it weather. Some call it breathing. If that's true, if the object is still alive, dormant, cloaked, recorded, it may still be waiting too, watching how we changed after it passed, waiting for the right moment to return, or to vanish forever. Either way, we face a horizon we can sit ignore. Every nation with space capability now has a contact doctrine. Not defensive protocols, not weapons manifests, but contact maps, paths humanity may take if the watchers appear, if they speak, if they deliver gifts or demands. These doctrines are drafted like peace treaties, but starker, with no room for false bravado. One common clause stands out. We respond as one species. On the worst day that meaning will be tested, because humans inherently fragment. But in that moment, if we answer, not as nations but as humanity, then perhaps the watchers will hear us not as noise, but as music. And maybe they sit to reply. After all, 3I/ATLS didn't scream. It didn't crash. It passed. It glowed. And then it folded into the dark again. Its message unspoken. Its meaning implied. We were seen. We know that now. And everything we do today, from the way we code, to the way we argue, to the way we heal, is in response. Not to fear, not to invasion, but to choice. Because a watcher doesn't just observe, they evaluate. Not our weapons, not our weapons, not our weapons, not our history, our potential. Every day, seen or unseen, we vote for what kind of species we are. With every act of creation, every act of destruction, every act of empathy, every act of denial, we cast our ballot. 3I/ATLS may be gone, but its legacy isn't. It's this, that something greater than ourselves knows we exist, and now we must prove we're worth the look. Every telescope, every lab, every heart beats in that question. Are we ready?